I did not raise my voice at that Christmas table. I did not slam a door. I just watched my son's face go still, like he had learned a new rule he never agreed to. That is when I realized my family did not forget he was adopted. They were waiting for the day they could use it. They thought they were teaching my child where he belonged. What they really did was teach me exactly where they did not. My name is Aurora Bennett. I am 34 years old, and if you looked at my life on paper, you would see a series of carefully checked boxes that suggest happiness. I have a career that I built from the ground up. I have a husband, Liam, who looks at me like I am the only person in the room, even after 7 years of marriage. And I have a son, Owen, who is 6 years old. Owen is adopted. He is bright, painfully observant, and possesses a heart so open it terrifies me. He is the kind of child who notices when a stranger looks sad in the grocery store and asks if we can buy them a candy bar. He is the best thing that has ever happened to me, but paper is thin, and it tears easily. We were on the interstate, driving north toward Carmel, Indiana. The sky was that flat, bruised shade of gray that promises snow but refuses to deliver it. The heater in our SUV was humming, blowing dry, warm air against my ankles, but I could not stop shivering. This was a pilgrimage we made every year. It was the annual migration to my parents' house, a tradition I clung to with a desperation that embarrassed me. I wanted so badly for us to be a normal family. I wanted the holiday montage, the matching pajamas, the laughter over burnt toast, the easy camaraderie that I saw in television commercials and in the windows of other people's houses, in the back seat. Owen was vibrating with energy. He was buckled into his booster seat, surrounded by a fortress of pillows and coloring books, but his attention was focused entirely on a plastic grocery bag resting on his lap. Inside that bag were the Christmas cards he had spent the last 2 weeks making. He had taken the task so seriously. I had watched him at the kitchen table, his tongue poking out the corner of his mouth in concentration, as he carefully glued sequins and glitter onto construction paper. He had asked me how to spell every name. He had drawn portraits of everyone, my mother, my father, my sister Kendra, her husband, and their children. "Mom," Owen said, his voice cutting through the low hum of the radio. "Do you think Grandma will like mine the most?" I turned in the passenger seat to look at him. His eyes were wide, filled with that terrifying, fragile hope. He held up the card he had made for my mother. It was a masterpiece of 6-year-old abstract art, featuring a stick figure with yellow hair that was presumably Diane. My mother, standing next to a very large, lopsided Christmas tree. "She is going to love it, baby," I said, forcing a brightness into my voice that I did not feel. "It is beautiful. You worked so hard on it." "I used the red glitter because red is her favorite," he said, smoothing the paper with a small hand. "And I drew her cat, too. See? Right there." He pointed to a black blob near the bottom of the page. "It is perfect," I said. Liam reached over and squeezed my knee. His hand was warm, grounding. He knew. He knew the anxiety that lived in my chest every time we crossed the county line into Carmel. He knew the history of small cuts and quiet exclusions that made up my relationship with my family. But he also knew that I was not ready to let go yet. I was still fighting for the fantasy. "We are making good time," Liam said, his eyes on the road. "We should be there by 4. I nodded. Turning back to face the windshield, the Indiana landscape rushed by. Skeletal trees, frozen fields, billboards advertising personal injury lawyers and fast food. I tried to visualize the next 48 hours. I played it out in my head like a coach reviewing game tape. If I just smiled enough, if I helped Mom in the kitchen without being asked, if I complimented Kendra on her promotion, if we kept Owen quiet and polite, maybe this year would be different. Maybe the ice would thaw. We pulled into the driveway of my parents' house, just as the streetlights were flickering on. The house was impressive, a sprawling brick colonial with black shutters and a manicured lawn that looked disciplined even in winter. A massive wreath hung on the front door, adorned with a velvet bow that looked like it had been tied by a machine. Everything about the house screamed perfection. It was a house that demanded you wipe your feet before you even thought about entering. We unloaded the car in the biting cold. Owen insisted on carrying the bag of cards himself. He marched up the walkway, his boots crunching on the salted concrete, his breath puffing out in little white clouds. I walked behind him, my stomach twisting into a tight knot. The door opened before we could knock. My mother, Diane, stood there. She looked exactly as she always did, impeccably put together, her hair stiff with hairspray, her sweater devoid of lint or wrinkles. "You made it," she said. It was not a question or an exclamation. It was just a statement of fact. "Hi, Mom," I said, leaning in to kiss her cheek. Her skin smelled of expensive soap and judgment. Traffic was not too bad. "We were worried about the ice," she said, stepping back to let us in. "Your father is in the den." Owen stepped forward, clutching his bag. He looked up at her, beaming. "Hi, Grandma?" he chirped. My mother looked down at him. The smile she gave him was a technical marvel. The corners of her mouth turned up. Her teeth showed. But her eyes remained completely flat. It was the kind of smile you give to a cashier or a neighbor's child who has wandered into your yard by mistake. It was polite. It was distant. It was hollow. "Hello, Owen," she said. She did not bend down to hug him. She did not reach out to touch his shoulder. She just looked at him, then looked back at me. "Make sure he takes those boots off on the mat. I just had the carpets cleaned." Owen's smile faltered for a fraction of a second, but he recovered quickly. He was used to working for it. He kicked off his boots and lined them up perfectly next to the door, just as I had taught him. "I made you a card," he said, reaching into his bag. "Oh, that is nice," she said, turning away before he could pull it out. "You can put it on the side table. Come on in. Dinner is almost ready." She walked away toward the kitchen. I stood there in the foyer, watching my son lower his hand. He looked at the bag, then at the retreating figure of his grandmother. He walked over to the side table, which was already piled high with glossy, store-bought cards from friends and business associates, and placed his construction paper creation on the very edge. "She is just busy, buddy," Liam whispered, helping Owen off with his coat. "She will look at it later." The evening passed in a blur of low-level tension. My father, Glenn, sat in his armchair like a king on a throne, accepting our greetings with a distracted nod. My sister, Kendra, arrived an hour later with her husband and their 2 children. Maddie and Connor. The atmosphere shifted immediately. When Kendra's kids walked in, my parents lit up. My father got out of his chair to swing Connor around. My mother cooed over Maddie's dress, pulling her into a tight embrace, asking her a dozen questions about school and dance class. Owen sat on the rug, playing with a toy car, watching them. He did not complain. He did not ask why Grandma had a hug for Maddie, but only a nod for him. He just watched, his large eyes taking in the data, cataloging the difference. I spent the night navigating the minefield. I complimented the roast. I laughed at my father's repetitive jokes. I listened to Kendra brag about Maddie's placement in the gifted program at school. Every time the conversation turned to Owen. It was brief. "He is doing well in reading," I offered at dinner. "That is nice," my mother said, and then immediately turned to Kendra. "Did I tell you that the neighbors asked about your promotion? They saw it in the newsletter." It was 1,000 tiny cuts, but we survived the night. We went to bed in the guest room. Owen curled up between us because the strange house made him nervous. I fell asleep telling myself that tomorrow would be better. Christmas morning was the great equalizer. The magic of the day would smooth everything over. I was wrong. Christmas morning broke with a deceptive calm. The sun was shining weakly through the frosted windows. The smell of coffee and bacon filled the house. We went downstairs in our pajamas. The living room was a chaotic sea of wrapping paper. Gifts were opened. Thank yous were said. Owen was gracious, hugging my parents for the Lego set they had bought him. A generic box, clearly picked out by an assistant, or grabbed as an afterthought. But he treated it like treasure. Then came breakfast. We gathered around the large mahogany dining table. The table was set with the good china, the silver that had to be hand-washed. There were pancakes, eggs, fruit, and a massive ham. It looked like a spread from a magazine. I sat next to Owen. He was happy. He had a new toy. He was eating pancakes with extra syrup. And for a moment, the tension seemed to have dissipated. He was swinging his legs under his chair, humming a little tune. Across the table sat my niece, Maddie. She was 8 years old, with blonde curls and a precocious awareness of the adult dynamics in the room. She was the golden grandchild, the one who could do no wrong. She had been watching Owen throughout the morning with a look I could not quite place, something between curiosity and disdain. The conversation lulled. The only sounds were the clinking of silverware against porcelain and the soft jazz playing from the speakers. Then Maddie sat up straighter in her chair. She set her fork down with a deliberate motion. She looked directly across the table at Owen. "Grandma told me you are not her real grandson," she said. Her voice was clear as a bell. It was not a whisper. It was not a question. It was a statement delivered with the casual cruelty that only children are capable of, because they have not yet learned to hide the knives they are handed by adults. The air left the room. Time seemed to warp, stretching out into an agonizing slow motion. I felt my heart stop in my chest, a physical hitch that stole my breath. I looked at Owen. He did not cry. He did not scream. He just went quiet. He stopped chewing, slowly, painfully slowly. He lowered his fork to his plate. He shrank. That is the only way to describe it. His shoulders rolled forward, his chin tucked down, and his eyes glued themselves to the floor. It was the reaction of a child who has been hit and is trying to make himself small enough that the next blow might miss him. He looked like he was apologizing for existing. I waited. I waited for the eruption. I waited for my mother to gasp, to scold Maddie, to rush over to Owen and pull him into her arms and say, "No, no, darling, that is not true. You are my grandson, and I love you." I waited for my father to roar. I waited for Kendra to be mortified by her daughter's words. But the eruption never came. The room did not rush to fix it. My mother, the woman who had insisted on the good china and the perfect wreath, did not even blink. She reached out her hand and lifted her coffee mug. She took a sip. She looked over the rim of the cup, her gaze sweeping past Owen as if he were invisible, as if the devastation of a 6-year-old boy was as inconsequential as the weather. She swallowed. She set the cup back down. Silence. The silence was heavier than the table. It was a living thing, suffocating and thick. It was a confirmation. Then, a sound broke it. A giggle. It came from Kendra. It was not a nervous laugh. It was not the shocked, involuntary sound of someone who does not know how to react to a disaster. It was a light, airy giggle. It was the sound of someone who had heard the punchline to a joke she had helped write. She looked at Maddie, a small, conspiratorial smile playing on her lips, as if her daughter had just said something slightly precocious, but ultimately clever. That giggle was the sound of a door slamming shut forever. Beside me, Liam moved. He stood up slowly. His chair scraped against the hardwood floor, a harsh, grating screech that sounded like violence. He was vibrating. I could feel the heat radiating off him. His hands were clenched into fists at his sides, his knuckles white. He was looking at my mother, and the expression on his face was one I had never seen before. It was pure, unadulterated hatred. He was taking a breath, his chest expanding, ready to unleash a torrent of words that would burn this house to the ground. I reached out under the table. I found his hand. I squeezed it once, hard. I did not look at him. I kept my eyes fixed on my son's bowed head, but my squeeze said everything. It was a silent, desperate plea. Not here, not now, not in front of Owen. If he screamed now, if he started a war in this dining room, Owen would think he was the cause of it. Owen would think his existence had destroyed Christmas. I could not let that happen. I had to get him out. I had to protect him from the shrapnel. Liam froze. I could feel the tremors running through his arm. He held his breath for 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds. The silence stretched, filled only by the horrific echo of Maddie's words and Kendra's giggle. My mother picked up a piece of melon with her fork and put it in her mouth. She chewed calmly. We were alone. We had always been alone. I just had not been willing to see it until this very moment. The family I thought I was fighting for did not exist. These people were strangers who shared my DNA, and they had just hurt my son in a way that could never be undone. Liam remained standing, a statue of fury, his hand locked in mine. The decision was made in that silence. We were done, but first, we had to survive the next 5 minutes. People usually talk about a breaking point as if it is a sudden, violent snap, like a bone fracturing under too much weight. But standing there in the dining room, holding my husband's hand while the silence stretched out like a funeral shroud, I realized that was not how it happened at all. It was not a snap. It was an accumulation. It was 5 years of sediment settling in the bottom of a river until the water became too shallow to navigate. The sentence Maddie had spoken, that Owen was not the real grandson, did not come from nowhere. It was the headline of a story they had been writing in the margins of our lives since the day we brought him home. I looked at my mother, Diane, who was calmly buttering a piece of toast, and the blinders finally fell off my eyes. I had spent half a decade translating their behavior, rewriting their indifference into something that looked like awkward love. I had told myself that they were just old-fashioned. I had told myself they were adjusting. I had told myself that biology was a language they spoke fluently, and adoption was a dialect they were still learning, but I was lying to myself. I thought back to the very first Christmas after the adoption was finalized. Owen was 2 years old. We had arrived at the house, exhausted and happy, and my father, Glenn, had opened the door. He had looked at me, then at Liam, and finally at the toddler in my arms. He did not say, "Look at my grandson." He did not say, "Welcome home." He had looked at Owen with a vague, polite confusion, as if I were holding a neighbor's cat I had agreed to watch for the weekend. "So," he had said, clapping his hands together, "this is Aurora's boy." Aurora's boy. That was the label. That was the category. For 5 years, they had never once, not in a birthday card, not in a toast, not in a casual conversation, used the words, "our grandson." It was always your son, or Aurora's child, or the little guy. It felt like a clerical distinction, a label on a storage bin in a warehouse, designating ownership so that if he were ever lost, they would know which department to return him to. It was a way of drawing a circle that included them and Kendra and her children, and leaving Owen and me standing just outside the chalk line. It was in the micro-cuts. It was in the pauses. Every time I told a story about Owen doing something funny or smart, there would be a beat of silence. 1 second, maybe 2, before my mother would offer a tight, meaningless smile and say, "That is nice," and then, immediately, without taking a breath. She would pivot. She would ask about the weather. She would ask about traffic. She would ask about literally anything else to cleanse the palate of the topic of my son. And God, the holidays, every Thanksgiving and Christmas, Owen was treated like a guest, not a family member, but a guest. A guest is someone you are polite to. A guest is someone you offer a drink to. A guest is someone you tolerate because social contract dictates it. But a guest is not someone you claim. I watched Kendra's children, Maddie and Connor, run through this house like they owned it. They opened the refrigerator without asking. They jumped on the good furniture. They interrupted conversations, and my parents loved it. They laughed. They called it high spirits. They called it being a Bennett. But if Owen so much as touched a figurine on the mantel, the air in the room would freeze, my mother would say. "Careful now," in a voice that was sharp enough to slice skin. Owen learned early. He learned to sit still. He learned to keep his hands in his lap. He learned that in this house, his existence was something that had to be apologized for. He was not a grandson here. He was a liability. And yet, I kept coming back. I stood there, feeling the warmth of Liam's hand, and I hated myself for it. I had kept bringing him here. I had kept exposing him to this cold radiation because I was desperate for him to have what I had never questioned. I wanted him to have grandparents. I wanted him to have cousins. I wanted him to have a history. I grew up with a grandmother who smelled like cinnamon and peppermint, who thought the sun rose and set in my eyes. I wanted that for Owen so badly that I was willing to pay for it with my own dignity. And speaking of payment, that was the other half of the equation. That was the part that made the bile rise in my throat, because while they were rejecting my son, they were certainly accepting my husband's money. It started 3 years ago. Liam's startup, Stonegate Systems, had moved out of the garage phase and into the acquisition phase. Suddenly, we were not just comfortable, we were wealthy. We did not flash it around. We did not buy sports cars or yachts. But the family knew. You cannot hide that kind of shift. It began with the little things. My father mentioned the transmission on his 10-year-old Ford was shot, and he was thinking of taking out a loan. Liam, generous to a fault, just wrote the check. $2,000, no repayment needed. Then it was the roof. Then it was a medical bill for my mother's dental work. Then it was holiday help, because the pension wasn't stretching as far as it used to. We created an unspoken arrangement. We became the safety net. Every month, a transfer went from our account to theirs. It was not a fortune, but it was significant. It was enough to cover their mortgage gap. It was enough to keep them in the country club. It was enough to maintain the illusion of their upper-middle-class life in Carmel. And over time, the gratitude evaporated. The thank you so much turned into, did you send it yet? The help became an entitlement. My mother started budgeting as if our money was a fixed-line item on her spreadsheet. She would mention that she wanted to redo the sunroom, looking at me with an expectant expression, as if I were a bank officer she had an appointment with. They took the money Liam made, the money that provided for Owen, and they spent it on a life that excluded Owen. They drove the car we paid to fix to go visit Kendra's kids at their recitals. But they claimed they were too tired to drive 20 minutes to Owen's school play. They used the dental implants we paid for to smile at Maddie's graduation photos. But they could barely muster a grimace for Owen's Christmas card. The adoption wasn't a secret they were ashamed of. I realize that now. It was a weapon. It was a lever. It was the excuse they kept polished and oiled, ready to pull whenever they needed to exert control or explain away their cruelty. Well, you know, it is just different, my mother would say to her friends, lowering her voice. It is hard to bond when there is no blood connection. We try? Of course, they used his DNA as a shield to protect themselves from accusations of being bad people. They were not cruel. They were just traditional. They were not excluding him. They were just struggling to connect. And then there was Kendra. Kendra, my younger sister, the mother of the golden branch of the family tree. Her household was the sun this family orbited. Her children were praised loudly, their achievements broadcasted like national news. If Maddie got a B on a test, it was because the teacher was unfair. If Owen got straight A's, it was, that is good for him, said with the same enthusiasm one might use to describe a dog learning to sit. Kendra knew the dynamic. She fed on it. She liked being the one who gave our parents the real grandchildren. It gave her a status I could never touch. She used her children as currency to buy favor, and my parents bought it up wholesale. I looked at Kendra now, still with that faint, amused smile on her lips after Maddie's outburst. She did not look shocked. She looked satisfied. And that was when the final piece of the puzzle clicked into place. That was the realization that made my blood run cold. Colder than the Indiana winter outside. Maddie was 8 years old. 8-year-olds can be mean. They can be petty, but they do not invent complex concepts about lineage and legitimacy on their own. They do not spontaneously come up with the phrase, not her real grandson. That is not the language of the playground. That is the language of the dinner table. Maddie had not just come up with a cruel insult in the heat of the moment. She was repeating something she had heard. She had heard it said with authority. She had heard it said often enough that she believed it was a fact, a truth as solid as the ground she walked on. She had heard my mother say it. She had heard my sister say it. Grandma told me. That is what she had said. This was not a slip of the tongue. This was not an accidental overheard conversation. This was a narrative that had been discussed, refined, and repeated in front of my niece until she had memorized it. My mother had looked at my son, the son she accepted financial support from, and she had looked at her granddaughter, and she had taught that little girl that my son was less than. She had taught her that he was an imposter. The comment was not random. It was rehearsed. My parents had taken my money to keep their house warm, and inside that warm house, they had sat around with my sister and her children and laughed about how Owen didn't really belong. They had eaten the food we paid for and used the energy we provided to systematically dismantle my son's place in this family. I felt a clarity wash over me that was so sharp it was almost painful. The guilt vanished. The hope vanished. The desperate need to please these people and force them to love my child vanished. All that was left was the cold, hard math of the situation. They thought we were trapped. They thought the biological bond and the habit of seeking their approval would keep us seated at this table, swallowing the insults, writing the checks, playing the game. They had no idea that the game had just ended. Liam was still standing. The vein in his neck was throbbing. I could feel the vibration of his anger through his hand. He was ready to burn the world down for Owen, and for the first time in my life, I was not going to ask him to put the matches away. But we were not going to scream. Screaming is for people who need to be heard. We did not need to be heard anymore. We needed to be gone. I stood up. My chair made a small scraping sound on the floor. It was a quiet sound, but in that tomb of a dining room, it sounded like a gunshot. My mother looked at me. Her fork was halfway to her mouth. She paused. For a second, I saw a flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. She saw something in my face she had not seen before. She was used to Aurora the peacemaker, Aurora the pleaser, Aurora the one who just wanted everyone to get along. She was looking for that woman, but that woman was gone. She had been left behind on the highway, somewhere between the hope of a happy Christmas and the reality of a grandmother who disowned her grandson between sips of coffee. "Aurora?" my mother said. Her voice was tentative. I did not answer her. I turned to Liam. "Get the coats," I said. My voice was low. It was steady. It did not shake. "Get Owen's shoes." Liam nodded once. He released my hand and moved. He did not look at my parents. He walked around the table toward the foyer with a purpose that was terrifyingly efficient. I looked down at Owen. He was still staring at the floor, his small body rigid. "Come on, baby," I said, reaching down and touching his cheek. "We are going." He looked up at me. His eyes were wet, but the tears had not fallen yet. "Are we leaving?" he whispered. "Yes," I said. "We are leaving." "But what about presents?" he asked, his voice trembling. "We will open them at home," I said. "At our home." I looked up and swept my gaze across the table. I looked at my father, who was frowning as if I were being unreasonable. I looked at Kendra, who was rolling her eyes, preparing to call me dramatic. I looked at my mother, who was already composing her face into a mask of victimhood. They were waiting for the fight. They were waiting for the argument where they could tell me I was too sensitive, that Maddie didn't mean it, that I was ruining the holiday. I was not going to give them the satisfaction. I turned my back on the table. I walked toward the door, and as I walked, I started doing the math in my head. I calculated the mortgage payments. I calculated the car repairs. I calculated the cost of the country club dues. I added it all up, and then I subtracted it. 0. That was the new number. $0, 0 cents, 0 access. They had taught my niece a lesson about who was real family and who was not. They had made it very clear that blood was the only currency they accepted. Fine, if they wanted to rely solely on blood, they could see how far it went toward paying the electric bill. Liam remained standing for a moment longer, his hand releasing mine to pick up his water glass. He did not throw it. He did not slam it down. He simply tapped the rim with his fingernail. A single, crystalline ting that cut through the thick, suffocating tension of the dining room. It was a sound usually reserved for a toast. A sound that commands attention. Every eye at the table flicked to him. My mother paused mid-chew. My father looked up from his plate, his brow furrowed in that familiar expression of irritated bewilderment he wore whenever the script of his life went off track. Kendra stopped giggling, her smile fading into a look of defensive anticipation. Even Maddie seemed to sense a shift in the atmospheric pressure, shrinking back slightly into her chair. Liam looked around the table, meeting each pair of eyes with a gaze that was terrifyingly flat. "Well," he said, his voice low, calm, and deadly. "At least now we know who the smallest person at this table really is." He did not look at Maddie when he said it. He looked directly at my mother, then he looked at my father, then he looked at Kendra. Nobody laughed. Nobody asked what he meant. Nobody offered a confused "pardon me?" or a shocked "how dare you?" The silence was absolute. And in that silence, they confessed. They knew exactly what he meant. They knew exactly what had just happened. If they had been innocent, if this had truly been a misunderstanding or a child's accidental cruelty, they would have been clamoring to explain. They would have been apologizing. They would have been horrified. Instead, they just sat there. My mother's face hardened, her lips thinning into a straight line of disapproval, not at the insult to her grandson, but at the breach of etiquette by my husband. She looked at Liam as if he were a waiter who had just dropped a tray. Rather than a father defending his son from emotional evisceration, I did not wait for a rebuttal. I did not wait for them to process the insult. I turned away from the table. I did not argue. I did not plead. I did not utter a single word of explanation. I felt a sudden, frantic urgency to get out, a physical need to evacuate the premises that was as primal as escaping a burning building. The air in that house felt poisonous. Every second we stayed was another lungful of smoke. "Come on, Owen," I said, my voice steady only through sheer force of will. I walked briskly to the foyer, my heels clicking on the hardwood, a sharp, staccato rhythm of departure. I grabbed our coats from the rack. I did not care that I knocked a scarf onto the floor. I did not pick it up. I found Owen's little boots where he had lined them up so perfectly. I knelt down, my hands trembling slightly as I shoved his feet into them. "Mom?" Owen whispered, his voice thick with confusion. "Are we in trouble?" "No, baby," I said, zipping his coat with a fierce efficiency. "You are not in trouble. You were perfect. We just have to go, right now." Liam was right behind me. He had not said another word to them. He simply walked out of the dining room, leaving them sitting there with their ham and their hatred. He grabbed the car keys from the bowl on the entry table. "I will start the car," he said. "Get him in." I nodded. I ushered Owen out the front door, shielding him from the wind with my body. The cold Indiana air hit us like a slap, bracing and clean compared to the stifle of the house. Liam moved to the driver's side, and I buckled Owen into the back. Then I stopped. I looked at the trunk of the SUV. It was empty. But the trunk of my parents' car, parked in the driveway, was not. We had arrived with armfuls of gifts, beautifully wrapped boxes with hand-tied ribbons, expensive gifts, thoughtful gifts, a cashmere sweater for my mother, a new set of golf clubs for my father, a designer handbag for Kendra, and on top of each one, taped with care, were Owen's drawings. The drawings he had worked on for weeks. I stared at the house, through the bay window. I could see the back of my father's head. They had not even moved. I felt a surge of adrenaline that was colder than the wind. "Open the trunk," I said to Liam. He looked at me, puzzled, but he popped the latch. I turned and walked back toward the house. I did not go to the front door. I went to the side porch where we had stacked the overflow of gifts that hadn't fit under the tree yet. They were sitting there, waiting to be brought in for the grand exchange. I started grabbing them. I grabbed the golf clubs. I grabbed the bag with the sweater. I grabbed the large box containing the espresso machine Kendra had hinted she wanted. I grabbed the toys we had bought for Maddie and Connor. expensive electronic tablets that cost more than my first car. I carried them in armfuls back to our SUV and threw them into the trunk. I did not arrange them carefully. I piled them in. Every box I touched felt like a lie I was retracting. I saw Owen's drawing of the stick figure family taped to the top of the espresso machine box. The tape was peeling slightly in the cold. It looked pathetic. It looked heartbreaking. It looked like an offering to a deity that did not exist. They did not deserve these things. They did not deserve the money we spent on them. But more importantly, they did not deserve the piece of my son that was taped to the wrapping paper. They did not get to have his art while rejecting his heart. I was reaching for the last bag when the front door opened. Kendra stepped out. She was not wearing a coat. She hugged her arms around herself, shivering in her silk blouse. She looked at me, standing there by the open trunk of my car, wrestling a box of high-end cookware back into my possession. "Aurora," she called out. Her voice was high, incredulous. "What are you doing?" I ignored her. I slammed the trunk shut. She walked down the steps, her heels crunching on the ice. She looked annoyed, not sad, not apologetic, annoyed, as if I were causing a scene at a restaurant and embarrassing her. "Are you seriously leaving over that?" she asked. I froze. I turned slowly to face her. "Over that?" I repeated. "Maddie is 8. Aurora," Kendra said, rolling her eyes. "Kids say stupid things. She didn't mean it like that. You are blowing this way out of proportion. Mom is inside crying now. By the way, I hope you are happy." I looked at my sister. I looked at her face, which was so similar to mine, and realized I was looking at a stranger. She truly did not see it. She did not see the cruelty because she was part of the ecosystem that created it. To her, Owen was an accessory to our family, and my reaction was the malfunction. "Maddie is 8, I said, my voice shockingly calm. "Which means she repeats what she hears. She didn't invent that sentence. Kendra, you know it, and I know it." "Oh my God, you are so dramatic," Kendra huffed, blowing warm air into her cupped hands. "Just come back inside. Don't ruin Christmas for everyone." "Christmas was ruined the minute you let your daughter speak for the whole family," I said. "Go back inside. Kendra, go eat your ham. We are done." "You are going to regret this," she snapped. "Mom and Dad are going to be furious." "Good," I said. "Let them be furious. It will give them something to talk about besides my son." I walked around to the passenger side of the car and got in. I slammed the door. It was a solid, heavy sound, the sound of a vault closing. Liam put the car in reverse before I had even clicked my seatbelt. We backed out of the driveway, tires spinning slightly on a patch of ice before catching traction. I did not look back at the house. I did not look to see if Kendra was still standing there. We drove in silence for a long time. The Indiana countryside rolled by. Gray and desolate, the adrenaline began to fade, leaving behind a deep, aching exhaustion. I turned in my seat to check on Owen. He was fast asleep. His head was lolling to the side, his mouth slightly open. He was clutching his bag of leftover cards, the ones he hadn't given out yet, to his chest like a teddy bear. He looked so small. Kids have a limit. They have a reserve of bravery, a tank they draw from when the world is confusing and loud and scary. Owen had drained his tank dry in that dining room. He had held it together. He had been polite. He had absorbed the blow without shattering. And now, in the safety of the car, his body had simply shut down to repair the damage. I reached back and gently pulled the blanket up over his legs. "He is out," I whispered to Liam. Liam nodded. His hands were gripping the steering wheel so hard his knuckles were white. "I should have flipped the table," Liam said, his voice tight. "I should have burned the house down." "No," I said, reaching over and resting my hand on his forearm. This was better. Silence scares them more than noise. Noise they can dismiss as a tantrum. Silence is a judgment. We drove for 3 hours. We did not turn on the radio. We just drove, putting mile after mile between us and the people who shared my last name. We got home after dark. The house was cold, but it felt safe. We carried Owen inside without waking him, undressed him, and put him into his own bed. I stood in his doorway for a long time, listening to the rhythm of his breathing, assuring myself that he was still whole. I went downstairs. Liam was in the kitchen, pouring 2 glasses of wine. He looked aged, like the drive had taken 5 years off his life. We sat on the couch in the living room. Our own Christmas tree was twinkling in the corner. It looked beautiful. It looked peaceful. My phone buzzed on the coffee table. I stared at it. For a split second, a foolish, childlike part of me thought, maybe it is an apology. Maybe Mom realized what she did. Maybe Dad is calling to say he is sorry he let it happen. I picked up the phone. It was a text from Diane. I opened it. There were no words of regret. There was no "I love you." There was no "please come back." The message read, "Did you send the family holiday deposit yet? The transfer hasn't hit the account and the mortgage is due on the 1st. Let me know." I stared at the screen. I read it once. I read it twice. I read it a 3rd time, just to make sure I wasn't hallucinating. They had driven my son out of their house. They had allowed my niece to question his legitimacy. They had sat in silence while my husband called them small. And yet, their entitlement was so deeply ingrained, so absolute, that they still expected the check. They assumed that the arrangement was separate from the relationship. They assumed that my role as the family bank was irrevocable, regardless of how they treated the withdrawal slip that was my son. Something inside me shifted. It wasn't a snap. It was a settling. It was the feeling of a heavy door locking into place. It was a sensation of going quiet and sharp, like a blade being drawn from a sheath. I looked at the message. I looked at the history of our texts. Me sending photos of Owen that she never commented on. Me asking about her health. Me confirming transfer after transfer after transfer. 5 years of buying access. 5 years of paying a subscription fee for a family that didn't want us. I tapped the text box. My thumbs hovered over the glass. I did not scream. I did not type out a paragraph of rage. I did not list their crimes. They knew their crimes. I typed one sentence. This year's support was not meant for you. I looked at it. It was true. The money, the effort, the love, it was all meant for grandparents. It was meant for family. And since they had proven they were neither, they were not entitled to the benefits. I hit send. Then I blocked the number for the night, put the phone face down on the table, and took a sip of wine. It tasted like iron, but it went down smooth. The silence in our house was not empty. It was fortified, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was waiting for permission to exist. I felt like I was finally, truly, in charge, for 3 days. The phone sat on the kitchen counter like an unexploded ordnance. Silence is a funny thing in families like mine. In healthy families, silence might mean peace. In my family, silence was a tactic. It was the cooling-off period. It was the time allotted for me to feel guilty, for me to realize that I had overreacted, and for me to inevitably come crawling back with an apology and a check. They assumed this was just another episode. They assumed I was sitting in my house, stewing in my own drama, and that eventually, the conditioning they had installed in me since birth would kick in. I would remember that I was the good daughter. I would remember that keeping the peace was my job. They were waiting for the reset button, but they did not know that the machine was broken. I went about my week with a strange, robotic efficiency. I took Owen to the park. I made lasagna. I organized the linen closet. I did everything I usually did, but I did it with a new, cold operating system running in the background. I was not stewing. I was not preparing an apology. I was mourning. I was grieving the death of a hope I had kept alive on life support for 5 years. Then came Tuesday. It was 11 in the morning. I was folding laundry, matching Owen's small socks, when the phone rang. It was my mother. I stared at the screen. My heart did not race. My palms did not sweat. I felt a detached curiosity. I swiped to answer and put it on speaker. setting the phone down on top of a pile of towels. "Hello," I said. "Aurora." Her voice was tight. It was not the voice of a mother calling to check on her daughter. It was the voice of a woman who was standing in public and trying very hard not to scream. It was a whisper shout, high-pitched and trembling with humiliation. "Mom?" I asked, smoothing out a wrinkle in a towel. "What is it?" "I am at the pharmacy," she hissed. "There is a line behind me, a long line. Aurora, people are staring." "Okay," I said. "And?" "And?" she snapped, the facade slipping. The card was declined. The cashier ran it twice. She held it up and looked at it like it was fake. "Do you have any idea how embarrassing that is? To have a teenager look at you with pity?" I stood there, holding a tiny sock with a dinosaur on it. She had not called to ask why we left Christmas early. She had not called to ask if Owen was okay after Maddie's comment. She had not called to apologize for the silence at the table. She had called because the tap had run dry. "Why was it declined, Aurora?" she demanded, her voice rising. "What did Liam change on the account? Did he put a limit on it? Fix it. Right now. I am standing here with my blood pressure medication and a bottle of vitamins, and I look like a pauper." The entitlement was breathtaking. It was a physical force, hitting me through the speaker. She truly believed that access to my husband's bank account was a fundamental human right, like water or air. "Liam did not change the limit," I said calmly. "We canceled the card." There was a silence on the other end that was louder than the pharmacy noise. "You? What?" "We canceled the card. Mom," I repeated. "I told you in my text. The support is done. We are not paying for your pharmacy runs anymore. We are not paying for your gas. We are not paying for anything." "You cannot be serious," she sputtered. "Because of Christmas? Because of one little comment from a child? You are going to cut your parents off because you are being oversensitive?" "It wasn't one comment," I said. "And it wasn't a child. It was you. It was all of you. You made it very clear that Owen is not family. So why should the family money go to you?" "This is financial abuse," she cried out. And I heard a rustling sound, like she was turning away from the counter to hide her face. "You know we rely on that card for essentials. Your father needs his prescriptions. How can you be so cruel? Over a misunderstanding." "It was not a misunderstanding," I said. "It was the truth. You don't view my son as yours. That is fine. That is your choice. But my choice is to use my resources for my son. Put the vitamins back, Mom, or pay for them yourself. Aurora Bennett, if you hang up on me..." I tapped the red button. The call ended. I stood there for a moment, listening to the silence of the house. I expected to feel guilty. I expected the old wave of shame to wash over me. The voice that said, "You are a bad daughter. You are hurting them." But it didn't come. Instead, I felt a grim satisfaction. They had spent years treating me like an ATM with feelings they could ignore. Now, they were finding out that the ATM had a security protocol. 2 hours later, the email arrived. It was from my father, Glenn. My father did not text. He considered texting beneath him. He wrote emails, and he wrote them like he was drafting a corporate memo or a legal brief. He prided himself on his logic, his ability to dismantle an emotional argument with facts. The subject line read, "Regarding your recent decisions." I sat down at the kitchen table and opened it. It was not a letter, it was a lecture. It was formatted with bullet points. I could see him sitting in his study, wearing his reading glasses, typing this out with a sense of righteous superiority. "Aurora, your mother called me in tears. I am appalled, not only by your disrespect at Christmas, leaving without a word, stealing the gifts back like a common thief, but by this sudden, vindictive financial retaliation. We need to clarify a few things since you seem to have lost your perspective. 1. Family is complex. Bonds are forged through history and shared blood. That is a biological fact, not an insult. To pretend that adoption is identical to natural lineage is a modern fantasy. And while we accept Owen, You cannot force feelings that do not exist naturally. 2. Gratitude. We raised you. We paid for your lessons, your clothes, your college applications. The support you and Liam provide us now is not charity. It is a return on investment. It is what children owe their parents when they become successful. It is the natural order. 3. Priorities. You are choosing to punish your own flesh and blood, your elderly parents who are on a fixed income, to make a point about a child who, quite frankly, will never understand the nuances of this family anyway. You are choosing someone else's child over your own father and mother. Fix this immediately. Reactivate the card. Send the holiday transfer. We are willing to overlook your outburst if you make this right by close of business today. Dad. I read the phrase choosing someone else's child 3 times. There it was, written in black and white, pixelated proof of the rot at the core of his soul. To him. Owen was not my son. He was a stranger I had brought into the fold. He was someone else's child. I did not reply. I did not print it out. I simply moved the email into a folder I had named Evidence. The sun went down. Liam came home from work, his face pale and drawn. He kissed me, checked on Owen, and then went straight to his study. He had been quiet all week. A deep, brooding silence that worried me. I thought he was just angry. I thought he was processing the same betrayal I was. I didn't know he was holding a grenade. At 9 o'clock, my brother Adam called. Adam was the middle child. He was the one who had escaped. He lived in Chicago, worked in logistics, and maintained a safe, cynical distance from the family drama in Indiana. He was not the golden child like Kendra, and he was not the doormat like me. He was the observer. "Hey," he said when I answered. His voice was low, and I could hear the wind of the windy city in the background. He was outside, probably smoking a cigarette, hiding from his own kids. "Hey, Adam," I said. "Did you get the memo? I am the devil." "Yeah, I heard," he said. "Mom called me. She said you are trying to starve them out. She said you have lost your mind." "She told Maddie that Owen isn't her real grandson," I said. "And she said it at the Christmas table." Adam let out a long, ragged sigh. "Jesus, I knew they were bad. But that is impressive, even for them." "So I cut them off," I said. "All of it. The cards, the transfers, the extras." "Good," Adam said. "You should have done it years ago." "Thanks for the support," I said, surprised. Adam usually stayed neutral. "Look, Aurora," he said, his voice dropping even lower. "I am not just calling to cheer you on. I am calling to warn you. You need to know what you are actually cutting off." "What do you mean?" "They called me asking for money," Adam said. $5,000. Immediately. They said it was an emergency." "They always have an emergency," I said. "The roof, the car." "No," Adam cut me off. "This isn't a repair bill. Aurora. They are drowning. I did some digging because their panic didn't make sense. It turns out they took out a second mortgage on the house 4 years ago. A big one. And they are behind. Way behind." I froze. "A second mortgage? But the house was almost paid off. Where did the money go?" "Lifestyle," Adam said. "Country club dues, Kendra's wedding, trips, keeping up appearances. They have been bleeding cash for years, and they have been using your help to pay the interest, not the principal. Now that you stop the flow, they are looking at foreclosure." "Foreclosure?" I whispered. "It gets worse," Adam said. "When I told them I wouldn't give them the $5,000, Dad got quiet. He started talking about other options. He mentioned names. Aurora, not banks, individuals, private lenders." My stomach turned. "You mean loan sharks?" "I mean predatory lenders with high interest rates and bad tempers," Adam said. "The kind of people you don't sign contracts with. If they are desperate enough to go down that road, this is going to get ugly fast. They are not just broke. They are underwater and the sharks are circling. Keep your doors locked, And don't let them guilt you into sinking with them." We hung up. I sat on the couch, the room spinning slightly. I had thought I was just cutting off their luxury money. I didn't realize I had been the only thing standing between them and total collapse. "Aurora?" I looked up. Liam was standing in the doorway of the living room. He was holding a tumbler of whiskey, but he hadn't taken a sip. He looked like he hadn't slept in a week. "What is it?" I asked, my voice shaky from the call with Adam. "I just got off the phone with Adam. He says they have a second mortgage. He says they are broke." Liam closed his eyes. He took a deep breath, like a diver preparing to go under. "I know," he said. The air left the room. You know?" Liam walked over and sat down on the coffee table, facing me. He set the whiskey down. He took my hands in his. His palms were cold. "I have known for a year," he said. "How?" I asked, pulling my hands back. "How could you know?" "Because I have been paying it," he said. I stared at him. The words didn't make sense. "What do you mean, you have been paying it?" "I handle the transfers. I see the accounts." "Not from our joint account," Liam said softly. "From my personal bonus account, the one you don't look at." I felt a wave of nausea. "Liam, how much?" He looked down at the rug. $3,000 a month, for the last 11 months, plus a lump sum last February to stop the first foreclosure notice. I did the math in my head. My brain screamed, $33,000, plus a lump sum, 40,000? 50,000? "Why?" I whispered. "Why would you do that? Why wouldn't you tell me?" "Because I knew you would tell them to sell the house," Liam said, looking up at me. His eyes were full of a painful, desperate love. "And I knew that if you made them sell the house, they would blame you. They would make your life a living hell. They would say you made them homeless." "So you paid them?" I asked, my voice rising. "You paid them to treat us like dirt?" "I wasn't paying them," Liam said intently. "I was paying for you. I wanted you to have a normal year. I wanted you to stop worrying about why they were always stressed. I thought if I fixed the money problem, maybe they would be nicer. Maybe they would have space to love Owen if they weren't panicked about the bank." "It didn't work," I said, tears pricking my eyes. "They took the money, and they still treated him like a stranger." "I know," Liam said. "I know that now. I was stupid. I was trying to shield you from the reality of who they are." He reached out and touched my face. His thumb brushed away a tear I didn't know had fallen. "I thought I was buying you peace," he said, his voice breaking on the last word. "I didn't realize I was renting your silence." The sentence hung in the air between us. Renting my silence, that was exactly what they had done. My parents had taken the money, my holiday help, Liam's secret mortgage payments, all of it, and they had viewed it as a fee we paid to be in their presence. As long as the checks cleared, they would tolerate us. They would let us sit at the table. They would refrain from saying the quiet part out loud. But the moment the money stopped, the truth came out. They didn't love us. They were leasing us a spot in the family photo. "Stop it," I said. "Stop the payments. Stop the secret account. Stop all of it." "I did," Liam said. "I stopped it the second we got in the car on Christmas. I called the bank on the drive home." "Good," I said. I looked at my husband. I didn't feel angry at him anymore. I felt heartbroken for him. He had tried so hard to build a bridge to people who were only interested in burning it for warmth. "Adam said they're going to private lenders," I said. Liam nodded. His face hardened. The look of the ruthless businessman I sometimes saw when he was on a conference call returned. "Let them," Liam said. "They made their bed. Now they can sleep in it. But Aurora, if they are desperate, they are going to get dangerous. They aren't just going to email anymore. They are going to come for us." I thought about the evidence folder on my laptop. I thought about the text from my mother. I thought about the "not real grandson" comment. "Let them come," I said. "I am not the daughter who pays for peace anymore. I am the mother who protects her son." We sat there in the quiet house, surrounded by the wreckage of our family history. The net was gone. The safety lines were cut. My parents were falling, and for the first time in 34 years, I wasn't going to dive to catch them. I was going to watch them hit the ground. The silence I had imposed did not last long, but when the noise returned, it did not come through the front door. It came through the windows. It came through the cracks in the floorboards. It came through people I had not spoken to in half a decade. My mother, realizing that her direct line to me was severed, stopped calling my phone. Instead, she began a campaign of triangulation that was so wide-reaching it was almost impressive in its desperation. It started on a Wednesday morning. I received a Facebook message from Jessica, a girl I had lived with in a dorm room during my sophomore year of college. We had not exchanged more than a happy birthday post in 8 years. "Hey, Aurora." The message read, "I know it has been forever, but I just got the weirdest message from your mom. She sounded really frantic. She said she cannot get a hold of you and she is worried you are spiraling. Something about a mental break? I just wanted to check in. Are you okay?" I stared at the screen, my coffee cup hovering halfway to my mouth. Spiraling, mental break, before I could process the audacity of it. Another notification popped up. This one was from an old neighbor, Mrs. Gable, who used to live next door to my parents when I was in high school. "Aurora, honey, please call your mother. She is sick with worry. She says you have cut everyone off and are keeping Owen away from the family. Whatever is happening. Family comes first." I set the phone down. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from a cold, vibrating rage. This was the strategy. If they could not control me directly, they would control the narrative around me. They were painting a picture of a woman unhinged, a woman acting irrationally, a woman who needed to be saved from herself. By framing my boundary as a symptom of mental instability, they delegitimized my anger. If I was spiraling, then my reasons for cutting them off were just delusions. If I was sick, then they were the benevolent caretakers trying to help. It was gaslighting on a community-wide scale. I did not respond to Jessica. I did not respond to Mrs. Gable. I blocked them both. I realized that my circle was going to get a lot smaller before this was over, and frankly, I was ready to prune the dead branches. But the digital harassment was just the opening salvo. The real attack came that afternoon. It was 2:00. I was in the kitchen prepping dinner, chopping vegetables with a little more force than necessary. When I heard the garage door open, I froze. Liam never came home at 2 in the afternoon. He was the VP of operations at Stonegate Systems. His days were walls of meetings that stretched until 6 or 7. I wiped my hands on a towel and walked into the hallway just as the door from the garage swung open. Liam walked in. He was still wearing his coat. He looked pale. His jaw set so tight I could see the muscle jumping beneath the skin. He did not say hello. He walked past me, dropped his briefcase on the floor with a heavy thud, and walked straight to the kitchen island. He leaned his hands on the marble counter and hung his head, taking deep, ragged breaths. "Liam?" I asked, my voice soft. "What happened? Is it work?" He laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. "You could say that," he said. He looked up at me. His eyes were dark. "Your father showed up at my office today. The knife I had been using to chop carrots was lying on the cutting board, but I felt like it had just been twisted into my stomach. What?" "He came to Stonegate," Liam said. "He was in the lobby." I felt the blood drain from my face. Stonegate Systems is not a place you just visit. It is a secured facility. There are key cards. There are security guards with serious expressions. There are non-disclosure agreements signed just to enter the elevator. It is a fortress. "How did he get in?" I asked. "He didn't get past security," Liam said. "But he made enough of a scene that the front desk called me. He told the receptionist it was a family emergency. He told her that his daughter was in trouble and he needed to speak to his son-in-law immediately. He played the confused, terrified old man perfectly. My admin pulled me out of a board meeting. Aurora, a board meeting. I pulled out a stool and sat down because my legs suddenly felt like water. Oh my God. Liam, I am so sorry. Don't be sorry, Liam said sharply. Be angry. Be furious. He reached into his suit pocket and pulled out his phone. He tapped the screen and set it down on the counter between us. I went down to the lobby, Liam said. I didn't want him causing a scene in front of clients. I took him to the coffee shop next door. I thought he was going to ask for money again. I was ready to tell him to go to hell. What did he say? He didn't ask for money, Liam said. At least, not directly. He asked for you. Liam's voice dropped an octave, mimicking my father's deep, authoritative baritone. He sat there, drinking a latte I paid for, and he looked me in the eye and said, Liam, we are worried about Aurora. She seems unstable. She has been isolated lately, hasn't she? Do you think she is having some sort of delayed reaction to the adoption? You know, sometimes women struggle to bond, and they project that anger onto their families. The room spun. Delayed reaction to the adoption. Struggle to bond. They were using the very thing I fought for, my connection to my son, and twisting it into a pathology. They were suggesting that I was the one who had a problem with Owen, that I was the one rejecting the family because I couldn't handle the reality of adoption. It was a projection so massive it blocked out the sun. He told me he thinks you need therapy, Liam continued, his voice dripping with disgust. He said, do you think therapy would help her reconnect? We just want our daughter back. We don't want her to make decisions she will regret when she is thinking clearly again. He is trying to recruit you, I whispered. Exactly, Liam said. He knows he can't manipulate you anymore. You cut the cord, so he is trying to bypass the security system. He thinks if he can convince me that you are crazy, I will take his side. He thinks I will override your decision and open the checkbook again because I am the rational husband and you are the emotional wife. Liam reached into his briefcase. He pulled out a folded piece of paper. He handed me this before he left. Liam said, he said he didn't want to burden you with it while you were fragile, but he thought I should know the stakes. I took the paper. It was a printout of an email, but it wasn't a normal email. It was forwarded from a generic Gmail address, something like Account Services 88, to my father's email, and then printed out. I unfolded it. It was a nightmare in PDF form. Attached to the email were 3 documents. The text of the email itself was short, written in red font. Final notice of default. Mr. Bennett. This is the final attempt to resolve the outstanding balance on your second mortgage. The total arrears are $42,000. If payment is not received by the 15th of January, foreclosure proceedings will be initiated immediately. Please find the attached notice of intent to sell. Below that was a screenshot of a bank account. It was my parents' primary checking account. The balance was printed in bold. Angry numbers. -$412. And below that was a handwritten note, scanned and attached. It was addressed to Liam. Please don't let her make a decision that hurts everyone. We are a family. We help each other. I stared at the paper. The date on the foreclosure notice was 3 days ago. The 15th, I said. That is next week. Yes, Liam said. They are out of time. They aren't just drowning. Aurora. They are at the bottom of the ocean. That is why he came to my office. That is why he is trying to diagnose you. He needs me to panic. He needs me to look at this foreclosure notice, feel guilty, and write a check for $42,000 to save the family home. I looked up at Liam. Did you? Liam looked at me with an intensity that made me hold my breath. I looked him in the eye, Liam said, and I told him that if he was worried about your mental health, he should probably stop gaslighting you. I told him that the only thing unstable about you is the family you were born into, and then I told him that if he ever showed up at my place of business again, I would have security escort him out in handcuffs. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. And the money? I asked. I crumpled up the paper and handed it back to him, Liam said. But he left it on the table. He said, just think about it, Liam, for Owen's sake. You don't want him to lose his grandparents' home, do you? For Owen's sake, that was the trigger. I stood up. The stool scraped against the floor. They didn't come to apologize, I said, my voice shaking. They didn't come to fix it. They came to recruit you as leverage. They are using my son's name to try and guilt you into paying off their debt. Yes, Liam said. They are. I walked out of the kitchen. I needed to move. I needed to do something with the energy that was currently threatening to blow the roof off my house. I walked up the stairs. I walked past the master bedroom. I walked past the guest room. I went into the small storage closet at the end of the hall. I turned on the light. Stacked neatly on the shelves were plastic bins. One of them was labeled Owen. Keepsakes. I pulled it down. It was heavy. I carried it into the hallway and sat on the floor, ripping the lid off. Inside were the artifacts of my son's life. There was the tiny striped hat they had put on his head at the hospital the day we met him. I remembered the smell of the sterile air. The way my heart had hammered against my ribs when the social worker handed him to me. There was the first pair of shoes he had walked in, scuffed little sneakers with Velcro straps. There was a piece of construction paper with his handprint on it in blue paint, dated 3 years ago. I picked up the hospital bracelet. It was so small. It was just a strip of plastic with his name and birth date typed on it. Owen Bennett. My parents had seen this bracelet. They had seen these shoes. They had held him when he was wearing that striped hat. And for 6 years, they had looked at this miracle of a boy. This child who was the absolute center of my universe, and they had seen nothing but a bargaining chip. They saw an asset. They saw a tool. They saw a way to manipulate me, and now Liam, into funding their country club lifestyle. They didn't care about his heart. They didn't care about his feelings. They only cared that his existence could be leveraged to keep the lights on in a house where he wasn't even welcome. I clutched the tiny bracelet in my fist. It dug into my palm. The tears came then, but they were not the hot, stinging tears of sadness. They were not the tears of a daughter missing her mother. They were cold tears. They were the tears of a mother who realizes that the wolves are not at the door. They are sharing her last name. I cried from fury. I sat there on the hallway floor, rocking back and forth, clutching my son's first identification bracelet, and I felt a hate so pure it felt like clarity. They had dared. They had dared to go to my husband's office. They had dared to question my sanity. They had dared to threaten my son's security by implying that his future was tied to their financial failures. Just think about it. Liam, for Owen's sake. I wiped my face with the back of my hand. I sniffed, hard. I put the bracelet back in the bin. I put the shoes back. I put the handprint back. I snapped the lid shut. I stood up. I was done crying. I walked back downstairs. Liam was still in the kitchen, staring at the email printout. "Give me the paper," I said. Liam looked at me. He saw my face. He saw the red eyes and the set jaw. He didn't ask if I was okay. He knew I wasn't. He handed me the paper. I walked over to the shredder we kept in the corner of the home office nook. I fed the foreclosure notice into the machine. I watched the blades eat it. I watched the words, final notice and family and blood turn into confetti. "What are we going to do?" Liam asked quietly. I turned to him. "We are going to let them lose the house," I said. "We are going to let them lose everything. And while they are losing it, we are going to find out exactly how deep this rot goes." "What do you mean?" "I mean," I said, "that if they are desperate enough to show up at your office, they are desperate enough to do other things. Dad didn't just come to talk. He came to fish. He wanted to see if the hook was still set." I walked over to the calendar on the wall and circled the date. "They have until the 15th, I said. "That is 5 days away. In those 5 days, they are going to try everything. They are going to escalate, and we need to be ready." I looked at Liam. "Check everything," I said. "Check your credit. Check my credit. Check the titles on the cars. If they have been forging a life they can't afford for 10 years, I want to know if our names are signed on any of the receipts." Liam's eyes widened. "You don't think—" "I don't think anything anymore," I said. "I verify. Check everything. Liam, tonight." because the realization had finally hit me, cold and hard as the tile floor I was standing on. They didn't want us. They wanted ours. And they would burn my son to ash just to keep themselves warm. The lull lasted exactly 7 days. It was the kind of week that felt heavy, like the air before a thunderstorm. We had circled the wagons. Liam had checked our bank accounts, our credit reports, and the titles to our cars. Everything on our end was clean. There were no mysterious withdrawals, no unauthorized users. For a moment, late on a Tuesday night, I almost let myself relax. I almost convinced myself that my father's visit to Liam's office was the climax, the desperate final act of a drowning man, and that now they would simply sink quietly beneath the waves of their own bad decisions. I was wrong. I was sitting in the living room, a laptop balanced on my knees, paying the electric bill. Owen was on the floor, surrounded by a chaotic sprawl of crayons and coloring books. He was humming the theme song to a cartoon, completely oblivious to the war being fought over his head. He was drawing a picture of a dog. He was focusing so hard, his tongue was poking out of the corner of his mouth. He was 6 years old. His biggest worry was whether he could stay inside the lines. My phone buzzed on the side table. It was not a text. It was a push notification from the identity monitoring service we subscribed to. We had signed up for the family plan years ago, mostly to protect Liam and me because of the data breaches that happen every other week at big companies. We had added Owen's name to the policy as an afterthought, a box checked just to be thorough. The notification read, "Alert. New inquiry detected." I frowned. We hadn't applied for anything. We weren't buying a car. We weren't refinancing. I picked up the phone and tapped the alert to open the app. I expected to see Liam's name. I expected to see a glitch. Instead, I saw the name at the top of the report. Owen Bennett. My stomach dropped so fast I felt dizzy. I stared at the screen. The letters seemed to vibrate against the white background. Subject: Owen Bennett. SSN. Ending in 8402. Inquiry. Type: Retail credit application. Creditor: J.C. Penny. Credit services. Status: pending review. My hands went cold. Not cool. Cold. Ice cold. The blood drained out of my fingers so fast they felt numb. Owen did not have credit. Owen did not have a job. Owen had a piggy bank shaped like a rocket ship that currently contained maybe $14 in quarters. I clicked on the Details tab. The app loaded slowly, the spinning wheel mocking my rising panic. When the full report popped up, I felt the air leave my lungs. Applicant address: 442 Maple Ridge Drive, Carmel, Indiana. My parents' address. I looked at the date. The application had been submitted yesterday. I looked down at Owen. He was holding a blue crayon, shading in the sky of his drawing. He looked up, sensing my gaze. "Mom?" he asked. "Do you like the blue?" "It is beautiful, baby," I said. My voice sounded hollow, like it was coming from inside a tin can. "It is the best blue," he smiled and went back to work. I stood up. I walked into the kitchen because I felt like I was going to throw up. I gripped the edge of the granite counter until my knuckles turned white. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't a clerical error. My parents had used my 6-year-old son's social security number to try and open a credit card at a department store. Suddenly, the comment at the Christmas table hit me with a force that nearly knocked me over. Grandma told me you are not her real grandson. I had interpreted that as emotional cruelty. I had thought it was about exclusion. I had thought it was about love and belonging. But looking at the glow of my phone screen, I realized I had been naive. It wasn't just cruelty, it was a classification. To them. Not real didn't just mean he wasn't loved. It meant he wasn't a person. It meant he was a resource. It meant he was an object they could use, in their twisted, desperate logic. Because he wasn't blood, they didn't feel the biological imperative to protect his future. They felt entitled to harvest his clean credit history because, to them, he was just an extension of the assets they believed I owed them. They were not just stealing from a child. They were stealing from this child because they didn't believe he mattered enough to count. I felt a rage so pure it was almost blinding. It was different from the anger I felt at Christmas. That was hot and fiery. This was cold. This was surgical. I did not scream. I did not throw the phone. I dialed my mother's number. It rang 3 times. Hello? Her voice was cautious. She didn't know if I was calling to apologize or to yell. Mom, I said. My voice was terrifyingly calm. It was the voice of a prosecutor reading an indictment. I am looking at an alert from my Identity Theft Protection Service. Silence on the other end. Total, dead silence. It says that yesterday, I continued, an application for a credit card was filed under Owen's Social Security number, and it lists your address as his residence. I waited. I wanted to hear her say it. I wanted to hear the lie. Oh, she said. Her voice went up an octave. It was the sound of bad acting. That? Oh, Aurora. Don't be silly. That must be a mistake. You know how computers are. Computers do not accidentally type in a social security number. Mom, I said. And computers do not accidentally list your address for my son. Well, I don't know what to tell you, she said, letting out a nervous, breathless laugh. Maybe your father was trying to buy him a gift? You know he's not good with forms. He probably put Owen's name down because it was for him. He was just trying to be nice. Aurora. He was trying to get him some clothes for school. He was trying to open a line of credit, I said, with a 6-year-old's identity. You are being dramatic, she snapped, the defense mechanism kicking in instantly. Always so dramatic. It is just a store card. It is not a federal crime. Why do you always assume the worst of us? We are your parents. We would never hurt Owen. You just did, I said. You tried to ruin his financial future before he can even read chapter books, and you did it because you are broke. We are not broke, she shrieked. How dare you? We are going through a liquidity crunch. It happens to everyone. If you had just sent the holiday transfer like a good daughter, we wouldn't be having this conversation. So you admit it, I said. You did it because I didn't send the money. I admit nothing, she shouted. I am hanging up. You are hysterical. Call me when you are ready to apologize for accusing your mother of being a criminal. The line went dead. I stared at the phone. She had gaslit me until the very last second, and then, in the same breath, justified the crime as my fault. I walked back into the living room. Liam was coming down the stairs. He had heard the shouting. What happened? He asked, looking at my face. They used Owen's social security number, I said. They tried to open a credit card. Liam stopped on the bottom step. His face went gray. Show me, he said. I handed him the phone. He looked at the alert. He looked at the details. I watched the transformation happen in real time. The sadness, the disappointment, the lingering hope that his in-laws were just misguided people. It all evaporated. In its place was the hard, steel gaze of a man who makes difficult decisions for a living. This is it, he said quietly. This is the line. There is more, I said. My phone chimed again. A text message. It was from Adam. My brother had been quiet since his warning about the private lenders. He had been digging. He worked in logistics, which meant he knew how to track things. He knew how to find paper trails. Aurora. The text read. I found something. I logged into Mom's old cloud account, the one she never changes the password for because she forgets it. I was looking for financial statements to see how bad the debt really is. I found a backup of her messages. Look at this draft. She wrote it to Kendra 2 days ago. I don't think she sent it, or maybe she deleted the sent version. But the draft saved. Attached was a screenshot. It was a draft email. The recipient field was Kendra. The subject line was blank. The body of the email read, Kendra, honey, don't worry about the tuition for Maddie's dance camp. We will figure it out. Aurora is being stubborn, but there are other ways. We still have the information from when we set up the college fund trust for the boy. If she won't help, we will do what we have to. We have to survive. It is not like he needs the credit score for another 10 years anyway. We can pay it back before he ever knows. I read it. Then I read it again. The boy, not Owen, the boy. And the line that stopped my heart. It is not like he needs the credit score for another 10 years anyway. They had discussed it. It wasn't a panic move. It wasn't a split-second decision by my father at a register. It was a strategy. My mother had typed this out. She had rationalized it. She had done the mental gymnastics to convince herself that stealing her grandson's identity was a victimless crime because he was a child, and she was telling Kendra, my sister, the one who giggled at the table, the one who asked if I was seriously leaving over a comment. She wasn't just a bystander. She was a beneficiary. Tuition for Maddie's dance camp. My parents were stealing from my son to pay for my niece. I felt a wave of nausea so strong I had to sit down on the sofa. The betrayal was absolute. It was a perfect circle of toxicity. The golden child got the spoils, and the scapegoat's son got the debt. They are coordinating, I whispered. It is not just Mom and Dad. Kendra knows, or at least, Mom feels comfortable enough to tell her. I handed the phone to Liam so he could see the screenshot. He read it. He didn't blink. He didn't look away. He absorbed the information like a computer processing a virus. "We will do what we have to," Liam read aloud. He looked at me. "That is premeditation," he said. "That is intent." He walked over to the window and looked out at the dark street. He looked at our driveway. He looked at the security camera we had installed over the garage. "Aurora," he said, turning back to me. "I need you to listen to me very carefully. I am listening. Up until 5 minutes ago, we were dealing with a toxic family," Liam said. "We were dealing with narcissists. We were dealing with bad boundaries and emotional abuse." He walked over to where I was sitting. He knelt down so he was eye level with me. He took my hands. His grip was firm, grounding. "But we are not dealing with disrespect anymore," he said. "We are dealing with fraud. We are dealing with identity theft. We are dealing with a conspiracy to defraud a minor." He looked over at Owen, who was still coloring, blissfully unaware that his father was declaring war. "They crossed the legal line," Liam said. "And once you cross the legal line, you don't get treated like family anymore. You get treated like a defendant." "What do we do?" I asked. "Do we call the police?" "We call a lawyer," Liam said. "Not a family lawyer. We call Marisol Kent." I knew the name. Marisol Kent was the general counsel for Liam's company's board of directors. She was a shark in a tailored suit. She didn't handle divorces. She handled corporate espionage, high-stakes litigation, and destroying people who tried to hurt her clients. "Marisol?" I asked. "Isn't she expensive?" "She is the best," Liam said. "And she owes me a favor, but even if she didn't, I would pay her triple. We are going to lock this down. Aurora. We are going to freeze everything. We are going to file a police report. And we are going to make sure that they never, ever get near Owen's information again. They will hate us," I said. "If we file a police report, they will say we are destroying the family." Liam stood up. He looked 10 feet tall. "They destroyed the family," he said, his voice hard as granite. "They destroyed it the minute they typed that social security number into a keypad. Now we are just cleaning up the crime scene." He pulled out his phone and started dialing. I looked down at the screenshot from Adam one last time. If Aurora won't help, we will do what we have to. I closed my eyes and let the last shred of guilt I had been carrying dissolve into the darkness. "Okay, Mom." I thought, "You did what you had to. Now, I am going to do what I have to." "Marisol," Liam said into the phone, his voice dropping into his professional cadence. "It is Liam. I need you. Tonight. Yes, it is an emergency. It involves identity theft. A minor. Yes, I will send you the files." He hung up. "She is on her way," he said. I looked at Owen. He held up his picture. "Mom, look," he said. "I drew a shield for the dog. So the bad guys can't get him. I felt a tear slide down my cheek, but I wiped it away before he could see. "It is a great shield, buddy," I said. "It is perfect." And tonight, we were going to build a real one. One made of legal filings, police reports, and ironclad restraining orders. The not real grandson was about to become the very real plaintiff. The woman standing in my living room did not look like she belonged in a crisis. She looked like she belonged in a boardroom, dismantling CEOs with a single raised eyebrow. Marisol Kent was not what I expected. When Liam said he was calling the company's general counsel, I pictured someone loud, someone aggressive, someone who would storm the gates, but Marisol was quiet. She was a study in stillness. She wore a charcoal suit that was tailored within an inch of its life, and her hair was pulled back into a bun so tight it looked like architecture. She didn't carry a briefcase. She carried a tablet and a legal pad. She sat at our dining table, the same table where we usually ate spaghetti and played board games, and turned it into a command center. "Walk me through it," she said. Her voice was low, smooth, and devoid of unnecessary emotion. I showed her the credit alert on my phone. I showed her the screenshot Adam had sent of the draft email. I showed her the text history with my mother. Marisol did not gasp. She did not shake her head in disbelief. She simply tapped the screen of her tablet, taking notes in a shorthand I couldn't read. "Okay," she said after 10 minutes of silence. She looked up at me. Her eyes were dark and incredibly sharp. "Here is the reality. Aurora, you are not dealing with a family dispute. You are the victim of a series of intentional torts and criminal fraud. We need to stop thinking like a daughter and start thinking like a plaintiff." "I don't want to put them in jail," I said, my voice trembling slightly. "I just want them to stop. I want them to leave us alone." "We will see about jail later," Marisol said, her tone clinical. "The police report is mandatory, not optional. If you do not file a report for identity theft, the credit bureaus will not remove the inquiry from Owen's record. You have to prove it was fraud, and to prove it was fraud, you have to name the fraudster." She slid a document across the table. "I have already drafted the affidavit," she said. "You just need to sign it." I looked at the paper. State of Indiana versus Glenn and Diane Bennett. My hand shook as I picked up the pen. This was the nuclear option. This was the moment I stopped protecting them. I thought about the not real grandson comment. I thought about the "we will do what we have to" email. I signed. "Good," Marisol said, pulling the paper back. "Now, we build the wall." For the next 3 hours, Marisol orchestrated a blitzkrieg of administrative violence. We called the 3 major credit bureaus. We placed a relentless freeze on Owen's Social Security number. We contacted the fraud department of the department store creditor and demanded the original application. We requested IP logs and physical signatures. Then, Marisol opened her laptop to draft the notice. "This is not a restraining order," she explained, her fingers flying across the keyboard. "Not yet. A judge won't grant a restraining order based on financial fraud alone, usually, but this is a formal notice of no contact. It puts them on notice that any further communication will be considered harassment." She read it out loud as she typed. "Your clients are hereby instructed to cease all direct and indirect contact with Aurora Bennett, Liam Bennett, and the minor child, Owen Bennett. This includes telephone calls, text messages, emails, social media interaction, and third-party outreach. Furthermore, you are strictly prohibited from approaching the minor child's school, extracurricular activities, or medical providers. Any attempt to access the minor child or his personal information will result in immediate legal escalation." "Third-party outreach," I said. "That means they can't have neighbors message me?" "Exactly," Marisol said. "If your college roommate or your old neighbor messages you on their behalf, we document it, and we add it to the harassment file. Speaking of which," she stopped typing and looked at me with an intensity that made me sit up straighter. "You need to become an archivist. Aurora, from this moment on, nothing is casual. If they text you, you screenshot it. If they email you, You save it with headers. If a stranger sends you a Facebook message saying your mother is sad, you capture it. If they send a card in the mail, you do not open it. You put it in a Ziploc bag and you date it. If it is not written down, it did not happen. Do you understand? I understand, I said. Good, she said. Because they are going to panic. And when narcissists panic, they don't just get angry, they get creative. Marisol was right. The silence lasted for 48 hours after the legal notices were delivered via courier. I imagined the scene at my parents' house, the courier knocking on the door, my father signing for the envelope, thinking it was maybe a check from a private lender, opening it, reading the words, notice of no contact, reading the accusation of identity theft. I expected an explosion. I expected my father to drive his car through our front lawn, but that is not what happened. On Friday morning, my phone buzzed. I had not blocked their numbers yet. On Marisol's advice, let them dig their own hole, she had said. Let the calls come through to voicemail. Let the texts arrive. Whatever they send is evidence. I looked at the screen. It was a picture message from my mother. I opened it. My stomach tightening. It was a photo of my parents. They were standing outside a brick building with a modest sign that read, Grace Community Counseling Center. They were holding hands. My mother was wearing a soft pastel cardigan, her church lady clothes. My father was looking at the ground, appearing suitably humbled. The lighting was perfect. The angle was flattering. It looked like the cover of a brochure for senior citizens recovering from grief. The caption read, We are trying. We know we have things to learn. Please don't shut the door on us. I stared at it. It was so perfect it felt fake. My parents had never gone to therapy in their lives. My father called psychology voodoo for weak people. 10 minutes later, a second text arrived. This one was a block of text, carefully punctuated, devoid of the usual erratic capitalization my mother used when she was upset. Aurora, we received the letter. We are heartbroken that you felt the need to involve lawyers. We want you to know that the credit application was a misunderstanding, but we take responsibility for the confusion. We are attending counseling to understand why we struggled to accept the adoption. It has been hard for the older generation to understand how these new families work, but we are willing to learn. We just want to be grandparents. Please let us fix this. I read it twice. Struggled to accept the adoption. Hard for the older generation. New families. It sounded reasonable. It sounded apologetic. If I were a stranger reading this, I would think, wow, look at these poor old people trying to overcome their generational bias. The daughter is being so harsh. I forwarded the screenshot to Marisol immediately. Her reply came back in 3 minutes. Do not reply. This is not an apology. This is a strategic pivot. They are building a paper trail. I called her. What do you mean? I asked when she answered. Look at the language. Aurora, Marisol said, her voice sounding tinny through the phone speaker. They are framing the identity theft as confusion. They are framing their cruelty as a generational struggle. They are creating a narrative where they are the flawed but trying parents, and you are the unforgiving daughter. If this ever goes to family court, they want to be able to show a judge that they tried to get help. So the counseling is fake? The counseling might be real, Marisol said, but the motivation isn't growth. It is optics. They are terrified of the fraud charges. They are trying to look reformed so that when we eventually speak, they can say, Look, we are fixing the problem. Why are you still punishing us? It makes me sick, I said. They are using therapy as a prop. It is a common tactic, Marisol said, but we can use it. If they claim they are ready to talk, we can test that theory. How? We agree to a meeting, Marisol said. No, I said instinctively. I can't see them. I can't look at them. Not a social meeting, Marisol corrected. A settlement conference. If they want to claim they are trying, let them prove it in a controlled environment. We set the terms. Public place. No Owen. Lawyers present. We tell them that if they want to avoid criminal prosecution for the credit card fraud, they need to sign a binding settlement agreement regarding the debt and the no-contact order. You want to use the fraud charges as leverage? I want to use the fraud charges to buy your son's permanent safety, Marisol said. Right now, we have a messy situation. I want a clean, legal severance. If they agree to the meeting, we can lock them into a contract that carries real penalties if they ever come near you again, and we can see if this counseling is real or if it is just a performance. I hesitated. The idea of sitting in a room with them made my skin crawl. But the idea of ending this, really, truly ending it with a legal gavel, was intoxicating. Okay, I said. Set it up. The scheduling took 2 days. My parents pushed back on the lawyer requirement. They wanted a family dinner. They wanted to meet at their house. They wanted to see Owen. Marisol shut them down with the efficiency of a guillotine. The meeting will be at the Meridian Mediation Center on Tuesday at 10 o'clock in the morning. Counsel will be present. The minor child will not be present. The topic of discussion is the resolution of the identity theft claim. Take it or leave it. They took it. The night before the meeting, I couldn't sleep. I wandered the house like a ghost. I checked the locks on the doors 3 times. I checked the window latches. I finally ended up in Owen's room. He was asleep, sprawled out on his bed in the starfish position that only children can achieve. His breath was a soft, rhythmic shh sound. The moonlight was filtering through the blinds, casting stripes across his duvet. I sat in the rocking chair in the corner, the chair I had nursed him in when he was a baby. The chair where I had read him thousands of stories. I looked at his face. It was so peaceful. He didn't know about credit scores. He didn't know about second mortgages. He didn't know that his grandmother had called him the boy in an email to his aunt. He just knew that he was loved. I realized then that for the last 5 years, I had been trying to balance the scales. I had been trying to be a good daughter and a good mother at the same time. I had tried to be fair to my parents, making excuses for them, giving them chances, trying to understand their generational perspective. But fairness is a concept for adults. Fairness implies that both sides have valid points. There was no validity in what they had done. There was no other side to identity theft. There was no nuance in telling a child he isn't real. I looked at Owen's sleeping face, and something inside me hardened into diamond. My job wasn't to be fair to the adults who raised me. My job wasn't to validate their feelings or help them through their financial crisis or manage their public image. My job was to be the wall between this little boy and the monsters who wanted to consume him. My job was to be safe for him. If that meant I had to be the villain in my parents' story, so be it. If that meant I had to be the cold, heartless daughter who dragged her elderly parents into a mediation room and threatened them with jail, fine, I would wear that label. I would wear it like armor. I stood up and walked over to the bed. I smoothed the hair back from his forehead. You are real, I whispered into the dark. You are the most real thing in this world, and I promise you, they will never touch you again. I walked out of the room and closed the door. I went downstairs and laid out my clothes for the next morning. Not a soft sweater, not jeans. I pulled out my sharpest blazer, the navy blue one with the structured shoulders. I pulled out my heels. I wasn't going to a family reunion. I was going to a negotiation, and I intended to win. The morning of the mediation arrived with a sky the color of a bruised plum. I stood in front of my bedroom mirror, buttoning the navy blazer I had chosen the night before. My reflection looked tired. There were dark circles under my eyes that no amount of concealer could fully hide. But my jaw was set. I looked like someone who was done negotiating with terrorists. My phone buzzed on the dresser. It was 7:30 in the morning, too early for business, too late for an emergency. I picked it up. The number was unfamiliar. A local area code I didn't have saved. Against my better judgment, I opened the message. Aurora, it is Brenda, from your mom's Bible study group. I hesitated to reach out, but the Lord laid it on my heart. Your mother is absolutely heartbroken. She can't stop crying. I know families fight, but she is elderly and fragile. Please, honey, be the bigger person. You have so much, and they are struggling. Don't let pride ruin a legacy of love. I stared at the screen, feeling a bitter laugh bubble up in my throat. Be the bigger person. It is the favorite weapon of the enabler. It is the phrase people use when they want the victim to swallow their pain, so the aggressor doesn't have to face consequences. Be the bigger person means stand still so they can hit you again. I didn't reply. I took a screenshot, forwarded it to Marisol with the caption, "Harassment log," and blocked Brenda's number. I went downstairs. Liam was already in the kitchen, drinking coffee black. He was wearing his suit, the charcoal one he wore for board meetings. He looked like a fortress. "Ready?" he asked. "As I will ever be," I said. Then the house phone rang. We almost never used the landline. It was a relic we kept for emergencies and for the alarm system. The shrill ring cut through the quiet kitchen like a fire alarm. Liam looked at me. He picked it up. "Hello?" His face changed instantly. The professional mask dropped, replaced by a look of sharp, predatory alertness. "Who is this?" he asked. Yes, I am his father. Wait, do not let them in. I repeat, do not let them in." My heart hammered against my ribs. "What is it?" I whispered. Liam held up a hand. "Mrs. Higgins, listen to me. Under no circumstances is anyone other than myself or Aurora allowed to leave anything for him. No. Call security if they are still there. We are on our way." He hung up. The phone clattered into the cradle. "It was the school," Liam said. His voice was terrifyingly quiet. "The secretary. Someone just called the front office asking to deliver a holiday care package to Owen." "Who?" I asked, though I already knew. "They said they were his grandparents," Liam said. "They tried to get the secretary to verify his schedule. They knew his teacher's name, Aurora. They knew he was in Miss Albright's class in room 302. My chest tightened so fast I felt like I was in a vice. How did they know? We never told them his teacher's name. We never told them his room number. We had been so careful. "They are testing the perimeter," I said, my voice shaking. "They want to see if they can get to him." "They can't," Liam said. "Mrs. Higgins said it was a phone request, trying to set up a drop-off. She got suspicious because we aren't on the list for third-party deliveries." I grabbed my phone. "I'm calling Marisol." Marisol answered on the first ring. I explained the situation in 3 breathy sentences. "Consider it done," Marisol said. Her voice was the only thing that kept me from hyperventilating. "I am contacting the school district's legal department right now. We are locking down the pickup list, the visitor list, and the delivery protocols. I am flagging his file with the existing police report number. If anyone even breathes the word grandparent at that front desk, the police will be called for trespassing." "They knew his room number." "Marisol," I said. "How did they know his room number?" "Social engineering," Marisol said. "Or they saw a picture on social media where he was holding a certificate, or they asked a neighbor whose kid goes to the same school. It doesn't matter how. What matters is that we close the gate. I am handling it. You focus on the mediation. This just gave us more ammunition." I hung up, but the fear lingered. It was a physical sickness. They weren't just attacking my finances. They were hunting my child. The care package wasn't a gift. It was a message. We can reach him. "We have to go," Liam said. "We can't be late." I sat in the passenger seat as we drove to the mediation center. I couldn't stop checking my phone. It was a nervous tick. I opened Facebook. I hadn't looked at it in days, afraid of what I would see. But now I needed to know what the battlefield looked like. I went to Kendra's profile. It was public. Of course it was public. Her latest post was from 2 hours ago. It was a picture of her daughter, Maddie, looking sad and holding a stuffed animal. The caption read, "It is so hard explaining to an 8-year-old why she can't see her cousin anymore. The adoption drama is tearing this family apart. It breaks my heart that some people use children as pawns to punish their parents. Keeping grandparents away from their grandkids is a special kind of cruel. Praying for soft hearts and open doors. Family first grandparents, rights, heartbroken." The comments were a cesspool of sympathy. "Oh, honey, that is awful. Some people are so controlling. Is this about Aurora? I always thought her husband seemed possessive. I scrolled down, and then I saw it. A link shared by Kendra. GoFundMe. Help Glenn and Diane rebuild after family abandons them. I clicked the link. My mouth fell open. The photo was the same one they had texted me. The counseling center photo, where they looked like tragic heroes. The description was a masterpiece of vague victimhood. Hi, everyone. Many of you know Glenn and Diane Bennett as pillars of our community. Recently, due to unforeseen family circumstances and a sudden withdrawal of support they were promised, they are facing the loss of their home. They have given everything to their children, and now, in their golden years, they have been left behind. They are too proud to ask, so I am asking for them. Please help them keep their home and pay for the legal fees they are incurring to maintain their rights to see their grandchildren. Goal: $50,000. They had raised $400 so far. They are monetizing it, I said, showing the phone to Liam. They are literally grifting off the fact that we cut them off. Legal fees to maintain rights, Liam read, glancing at the screen. There are no grandparents' rights in Indiana when both parents are intact and fit. They are raising money for a lawsuit that doesn't exist. It is humiliation, I said. They are trying to shame us into paying them to take the page down. It won't work, Liam said. Keep screenshots, all of it. My phone dinged. A messenger notification. I flinched. I expected another attack. Another, Brenda from church. But the name on the message made me pause. Sarah Miller. Sarah was Kendra's best friend. They had been inseparable since high school. Sarah was the maid of honor at Kendra's wedding. She was as much a part of the Golden Branch clique as anyone. I opened the message cautiously. Hi, Aurora. It began. I know we haven't talked in a long time, and I know I'm supposed to be on Kendra's side or whatever, but I have been seeing these posts, and the GoFundMe, and it is making me sick. I held my breath. I am a mom now, too. Sarah wrote, I have a 2-year-old, and if my mom talked about my son the way your mom talks about Owen, I would burn the world down. I thought you should see this. Kendra added me to a group chat with your mom last week to help coordinate the narrative. I left the group this morning, but I took these first. Attached were 3 screenshots. They were from a group chat named Bennett Family Strategy. The first screenshot was dated December 24th. Christmas Eve, the day before the incident. My mother. Diane. Okay, so tomorrow is the big day. Kendra. Make sure Maddie remembers what we talked about. If Owen starts bragging about his school or his gifts, she needs to remind him of the hierarchy. Subtly, Kendra. Don't worry, Mom. Maddie knows. She asked me yesterday why we have to pretend he's the same as her. I told her she just has to be honest. Diane. Good. We need to make sure Aurora understands that she can't just buy his way into the bloodline. A little reality check from a child is harder to argue with. I read it, and the air in the car seemed to vanish. It wasn't just a comment. It wasn't just a rehearsed line. It was a planned tactical strike. My mother had instructed my sister to weaponize her daughter. They had scripted the trauma of a 6-year-old boy. I swiped to the next screenshot. This one was dated 3 days ago, the day the credit alert hit. Kendra. Mom, Aurora found out about the store card. She is freaking out. She is talking about police. Diane. She is bluffing. She won't call the police on her own parents. She is just trying to scare us into sending the money again. Kendra. I don't know, Mom. She sounded serious. Maybe you should have used a different address. Diane. It doesn't matter. Look, if Owen isn't really ours, why should we pay for him to have things? Why should his credit sit there doing nothing when we are drowning? It is the least she owes us after saddling us with this situation. I stared at the words. If Owen isn't really ours, why should we pay for him to have things? There it was, the smoking gun, the undeniable proof that the identity theft was not an act of desperation, but an act of resentment. She felt entitled to his identity because she didn't value his humanity. She saw his credit score as a form of reparations for the burden of his existence. I started to shake. I wasn't crying. I wasn't hyperventilating. I was vibrating with a frequency of rage that felt dangerous. "Liam," I said. My voice sounded strange, like it was coming from underwater. "Pull over." "What?" "Pull over. Now." Liam steered the car into a gas station parking lot and put it in park. "Aurora, what is it?" I handed him the phone. He read the screenshots. He read the coaching. He read the justification for the fraud. He sat there for a long time. The traffic whizzed by on the highway, oblivious to the fact that my world had just imploded and reformed into something harder, sharper. Liam handed the phone back to me. His face was pale, but his eyes were clear. "We have them," he said. "They planned it," I whispered. "They planned to hurt him at Christmas. They planned to steal his identity. They talked about it like they were planning a dinner menu." "I know," Liam said. "How can they be this evil?" I asked. "I grew up with them. I thought they were just flawed. I thought they were just selfish." Liam reached out and put his hand on my shoulder. "They didn't change, Aurora," he said. "They just learned new packaging. They have always been this way. You just stopped buying the product." He looked at the mediation center down the road. "Send those to Marisol," Liam said. "Right now." I forwarded the messages to Marisol. "Received." She replied instantly. "Do not print these. I will introduce them. This changes the strategy. We aren't negotiating anymore. We are dictating." I looked at Liam. "I am ready," I said, and I was. The fear was gone. The guilt was gone. The lingering wish for a happy ending was gone. All that was left was the desire to bury them under the weight of their own words. "Let's go," Liam said. He put the car in drive. We pulled back onto the road. 10 minutes later, we walked into the mediation center. My parents were already there, sitting in the lobby. My mother was wearing the same pastel cardigan from the photo. My father was wearing a suit that looked slightly too big for him. When we walked in, my mother stood up. She put on a sad, hopeful smile. She opened her arms as if she expected me to run into them. "Aurora," she said, her voice trembling theatrically. "Oh, honey, I am so glad you came." I did not stop walking. I did not look at her eyes. I looked straight through her, focused on the conference room door where Marisol was waiting. I walked past her outstretched arms like she was a ghost. "Save it for the judge, Diane," I said as I passed. I heard her gasp. I heard my father mutter something angry, but I didn't care. I opened the door to the conference room and stepped inside. Marisol was there, arranging a stack of papers. She looked up and gave me a barely perceptible nod. The trap was set, and they had walked right into it. The confirmation from the creditor arrived on a Tuesday afternoon, landing in my inbox with the heavy, bureaucratic thud of a gavel. We had requested the full application file for the fraudulent credit account. I expected a mess of scrawled handwriting, perhaps a forged signature that looked vaguely like mine. What I got was a digital timestamp of betrayal. The fraud department of the retail chain sent over the metadata from the online application. It was cold, hard data, stripped of any emotional nuance. Applicant name, Owen Bennett. Social security number, verified. Address, 442 Maple Ridge Drive. Phone number, 555-0199. I stared at the phone number. I did not need to look it up. I had dialed that number thousands of times. I had dialed it when I got my acceptance letter to college. I had dialed it when I got engaged. I had dialed it from the hospital waiting room when the adoption agency finally said yes. It was my mother's cell phone number. There was no clerical error. There was no computer glitch. Diane Bennett had sat down at a computer, or perhaps tapped on her iPad, and she had manually entered her own contact information next to my 6-year-old son's social security number. She had wanted to ensure that if the bank called to verify the application, the phone would ring in her purse, not mine. It was calculated. It was precise. I forwarded the document to Marisol with a single subject line. Proof. An hour later, as if sensing the walls closing in, my father, Glenn, sent an email. It was a masterpiece of revisionist history. The subject line was simply, "Moving forward, Dearest Aurora, your mother and I have been doing a lot of praying. We feel that things have spiraled out of control due to high emotions and misunderstandings on both sides. We are family. Blood is thicker than water, and certainly thicker than money. We want to propose a sit-down dinner this weekend. Just us. No lawyers, no hostilities. Let's break bread. Clear up these misunderstandings about the store card, which was just a foolish attempt to get Owen some school clothes, and figure out a plan to move forward with love. We miss you. Love, Dad. I read it and felt nothing. No guilt, no longing, just a clinical observation of their tactics. They were trying to reset the board because they were losing the game. They wanted to get me into a room without witnesses, without Marisol, so they could deploy the guilt trip that had worked on me for 3 decades. I did not reply. I let Marisol handle it. Marisol's response was not an email. It was a formal letter, delivered via courier and emailed to them as a PDF. Dear Mr. and Mrs. Bennett, my client, Aurora Bennett, is in receipt of your request for a private meeting. That request is denied. Given the active investigation into identity theft and the documented attempts to bypass parental consent at Owen Bennett's school, there will be no informal contact. We are proceeding with the scheduled mediation on Tuesday. Attached. Please find the preliminary exhibit list we intend to present to the mediator and subsequently to the district attorney if a settlement is not reached. Exhibit A. Credit application, IP, log and phone verification. Exhibit B. School security incident report regarding the unauthorized care package. Exhibit C. Screenshots of text messages discussing the intent to use the minor child's credit. We suggest you arrive prepared to discuss a permanent severance agreement. Sincerely, Marisol Kent, Esquire. The reaction was immediate. They panicked. The silence that had held for a day shattered. My mother tried to call. I let it go to voicemail. She left a message that was a chaotic mix of sobbing and screaming. Aurora, please, you can't do this. We were just trying to consolidate debt. The rate on the store card was 0% for 12 months. We were going to transfer a balance, pay it off, and close it before Owen was even in middle school. It was never about him. We would never hurt him. We are drowning. Aurora, have some mercy. I listened to the voicemail in the kitchen, my hand gripping the counter, just trying to consolidate debt. They were admitting it. They were admitting they planned to load a 6-year-old's credit file with their bad debt to save themselves on interest payments. They viewed my son as a financial instrument, a 0% interest life raft. It was never about him, I whispered to the empty room. That is the problem. It is never about him. He is invisible to you until you need something. Then came the flying monkeys. Kendra, who had been posting publicly about grandparents' rights, sent me a private text that dripped with venom. I just talked to Mom. She is hyperventilating. Dad is holding his chest. If you press charges, if you drag this into court, you will destroy them. Is that what you want? To put your elderly parents in jail over a credit card? You are cold. Aurora, I don't even recognize you. Are you proud of yourself? I looked at the text. Are you proud of yourself? I thought about Owen sleeping upstairs. His identity safe for now only because I had caught them. I thought about the not real comment. I thought about the boy email. Yes, I thought, I am extremely proud of myself. I didn't reply to Kendra. I screenshotted the text and added it to the folder. But the final blow to my lingering hesitation came from Adam. My brother called me late that night. He sounded exhausted. He sounded like a man who had been listening to his parents scream for 6 hours. Aurora, he said, you need to know what they are saying over here. I heard the voicemail, I said. They are saying they just wanted to consolidate debt. No, Adam said. That is what they are telling you. That is the spin for the daughter they want to manipulate. I am talking about what Dad is telling the rest of the family. He was on the phone with Uncle Steve an hour ago. Uncle Steve? I asked. Why are they dragging Steve into this? Because they need money, Adam said. And to get money, they need a story. Glenn told Steve that this is all a misunderstanding because Liam reneged on a contract. I frowned. What contract? Liam never had a contract with them. Dad is telling people that when you got married, Liam promised to support them for life, Adam said. He is saying that your marriage was basically a financial merger. He told Steve, Liam agreed to take care of us in exchange for marrying into the family. Now he is breaking his word because Aurora is having a breakdown. The room seemed to tilt. In exchange for marrying into the family. My father believed that my husband had purchased me. He believed that his approval of our marriage came with a monthly subscription fee. He didn't see Liam as a son-in-law. He saw him as a patron who had stopped paying his dues. It explained everything. It explained the entitlement. It explained why they felt justified in stealing from Owen. In their minds, they were owed this money, if Liam wouldn't give it to them voluntarily. They were entitled to take it through the back door, through Owen. He is telling people Liam bought me? I asked, my voice quiet. Basically, Adam said. He thinks you are an asset, Aurora, and he thinks he still holds the deed. I hung up the phone. I sat there for a long time. I felt a strange sense of peace settling over me. It was the peace of total clarity. There was no love here. There was no confusion. There was only a transaction that had gone sour. They wanted me to trade my son's safety for their comfort. They wanted me to sacrifice Owen's future so they could maintain their country club membership and their delusion of status. The mediation was set for 10 o'clock the next morning. At 8 in the morning, right as I was pouring my coffee, my phone chimed with one last message from Diane. It wasn't angry. It wasn't frantic. It was designed to be the ultimate guilt trip. If you loved your family, you wouldn't do this. I looked at the words. If you loved your family, she was right. If I loved her version of family, the version where image mattered more than truth, where hierarchy mattered more than heart, I wouldn't do this. I would sweep it under the rug. I would pay the debt. I would let them use Owen. But I didn't love that family. I loved the family I had built. I loved the little boy eating cereal in the next room. I loved the husband who was currently putting on his tie in the hallway. Ready to go to war for us. I didn't reply. I walked into the hallway. Liam was adjusting his cufflinks. He looked at me. You okay? He asked. I am ready, I said. I have something for you, Liam said. I wasn't sure if I should use it, but after what Adam told you last night, I think we need the nuclear option. He pulled a small USB drive out of his pocket. What is this? I asked. You know how Glenn came to my office last week? Liam said. And how I told you he tried to recruit me? Yes. I told you he asked for you to get therapy, Liam said. But he said something else, something I didn't tell you because I didn't want to hurt you more. But now I think you need to hear it, and Marisol needs to play it. Play it? My office has audio security, Liam said. High definition. It records everything in the executive suite. I pulled the file. He walked over to his laptop, plugged in the drive, and clicked a file. My father's voice filled the room. It was clear as day. It sounded calm, reasonable, almost businesslike. Look, Liam, I know she is stubborn. Aurora has always been difficult when she gets an idea in her head. But let's be men here. You are the money. She is just the mother. You hold the purse strings. How do we get around her? How do we structure this so you can get us the funds without her knowing? She doesn't need to know the details of the business, right? I stood frozen. She is just the mother. How do we get around her? He wasn't just trying to recruit Liam. He was trying to conspire with him to bypass me entirely. He was asking my husband to help him embezzle money from our family behind my back. Liam stopped the recording. He tried to make me an accomplice, Liam said. He thought because I am a man, I would side with him. He thought I would view you as a hurdle to be managed, not a partner to be respected. I took the USB drive from Liam's hand. I closed my fingers around it. It was the final nail. It proved that there was no respect. There was no relationship. There was only a predator looking for a weak point in the fence. Bring it, I said. We drove to the mediation center in silence. We walked into the building. The receptionist directed us to conference room B. I walked down the hallway. My heels clicked on the tile floor. I felt light. I felt weightless. I wasn't going in there to scream. I wasn't going in there to cry. I wasn't going in there to punish them. Punishment implies you care about the person learning a lesson. I didn't care if they learned. I only cared that they stopped. I was going in there to perform an amputation. Marisol was waiting at the door. She looked at the USB drive in my hand. "Is that what I think it is?" she asked. "It is the end of the discussion," I said. Marisol smiled. "A sharp, dangerous thing." "Good. Let's go." We opened the door. My parents were sitting on one side of the long oval table. They looked small. My mother had a tissue in her hand, dabbing at dry eyes. My father was shuffling papers, trying to look important. Kendra was not there. She was smart enough to stay out of the blast radius. When we walked in, my mother looked up. She started to stand, her face crumbling into a practiced mask of tragedy. "Aurora," she wailed softly. "Please." I didn't sit down. I stood at the head of the table. I placed the USB drive on the polished wood surface. It made a small click that echoed in the room. "Sit down, Diane," I said. My voice was not loud, but it was the voice of the person holding all the cards, and for the first time in their lives. They recognized it. They sat. I looked at the mediator, a calm man named Mr. Henderson. "We are not here to negotiate a relationship," I said to him. "We are here to negotiate a surrender." I looked at my parents. "And before you start with the family speech," I said, pointing to the drive, "we are going to listen to Glenn explain to my husband how to get around the mother of his child." My father went pale. The blood drained from his face so fast he looked like wax. He knew. He remembered. "Play it," I said to Marisol. And as the recording began to spin, I finally relaxed. The net was gone, yes, but I had learned to fly. The conference room smelled of stale coffee and industrial carpet cleaner. It was a sterile, lifeless box designed for compromise. But as I sat down next to Liam and Marisol, I knew there would be no compromise today. There would only be a reckoning. My mother, Diane, was already seated. She was wearing what I mentally called the repentance costume. It was a soft beige cardigan over a modest floral blouse, the kind of outfit a grandmother wears in a pharmaceutical commercial. She had a tissue balled up in her hand, and her eyes were red-rimmed. She looked fragile. She looked harmless. She looked like a woman who had been wronged by a cruel, ungrateful daughter. My father, Glenn, sat next to her. He was stiff, his jaw set in a line of righteous indignation. He refused to look at Liam. He refused to look at me. He stared at the mediator, Mr. Henderson, as if waiting for him to bang a gavel and order us to write a check. Kendra sat in the corner, ostensibly there for moral support. She was scrolling on her phone, looking bored, but her leg was bouncing up and down with nervous energy. Mr. Henderson cleared his throat. "We are here to discuss the outstanding issues regarding the credit inquiry and the family dispute. I understand there is a desire to find a path to reconciliation." "We just want our family back," my mother whispered, her voice trembling perfectly on cue. "We are willing to forgive Aurora for the misunderstanding. We just want to move forward. We are in counseling. We are trying to understand this new world." She reached across the table, her hand hovering in the air, asking for a connection. "Aurora, honey," she said, "can we just stop this? Can we just hug and start over?" I did not move. I did not soften. Marisol placed a hand on my arm, signaling me to stay quiet. She opened her folder. "There will be no hugging," Marisol said. Her voice was not loud, but it had the cutting quality of a diamond saw. "And there is no misunderstanding. We are here to establish the timeline of events that led to a felony identity theft application." "Objection," my father snapped. "It was not a felony. It was a mistake." "Let me finish," Marisol said, not even looking at him. She slid a piece of paper across the table. It was a timeline, printed on thick, legal stock. December 25th, Marisol read. Your granddaughter, under your instruction, informs Owen Bennett he is not a real member of this family. December 26th, you demand a financial transfer. December 28th, Glenn Bennett attempts to ambush Liam Bennett at his place of employment to solicit funds. January 2nd, you initiate a harassment campaign through third parties. January 4th, you use the social security number of a 6-year-old child to apply for a credit card at JSC. Penny, listing your own phone number as the contact. She looked up. This is not a family dispute, Marisol said. This is a predatory pattern. My father scoffed. He leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. Aurora is emotional, he said to the mediator, giving him a man-to-man look. She has always been dramatic. She takes things out of context. She is clearly having some sort of breakdown, and she is dragging her husband down with her. We are just trying to help them stabilize. Marisol didn't argue. She didn't get angry. She simply reached for the laptop in front of her. Mr. Bennett claims my client is emotional and unstable, Marisol said, and that he only wants to help. Let us listen to what Mr. Bennett sounds like when he thinks his daughter isn't listening. She pressed the spacebar. The audio from Liam's office filled the small room. It was crystal clear. She is stubborn, but you are the money. How do we get around her? How do we get her to stop blocking us? My father's face went from flush to chalk white in 3 seconds. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. The recording continued. She is just the mother. You hold the purse strings. The silence in the room following the clip was absolute. It was the sound of a mask shattering on a concrete floor. Mr. Henderson, the mediator, shifted in his seat. He looked at my father with a new expression. It wasn't neutrality anymore. It was disgust. That, Marisol said, is not the voice of a concerned grandfather. That is the voice of a co-conspirator attempting to solicit financial fraud against his own daughter. My mother started to cry. Real tears this time. Panic tears. I never meant any harm, she wailed, grabbing my father's arm. We were just desperate. We were trying to save the house. It wasn't about hurting Owen. We love Owen. Do you? Marisol asked. She reached into her folder again. She pulled out the screenshots Sarah had sent me, the group chat. She slid them across the polished wood table. They landed right in front of my mother. Please read the highlighted text, Marisol said. My mother looked down. She saw her own words staring back at her. If Owen isn't really ours, why should we pay for him to have things? My mother gasped. She looked up at me, her eyes wide with terror. She knew there was no spinning this. She knew she had been caught in 4K resolution. I was just venting, she stammered. I didn't mean it. You coached your granddaughter to reject him, I said. It was the first time I had spoken. My voice was steady. You told Kendra to make sure Maddie knew the hierarchy. You scripted his pain. It is not like that, Kendra shouted from the corner. She stood up, her face red. The mask of the bored sister fell away, revealing the entitlement underneath. You are twisting everything, Kendra yelled, pointing a finger at me. You are ruining Mom and Dad's lives over a credit card. So what if they used his number? He is a kid. He doesn't need credit. You are choosing an adopted kid over your own blood. You are choosing a stranger over us. The room went deadly still. Kendra froze, realizing what she had just screamed. She had just confirmed the entire case. Choosing an adopted kid over your own blood. I looked at the mediator. Thank you, Kendra, I said softly. I think you just made the closing argument for me. The representative from the creditor, who had been listening on the speakerphone, spoke up. His voice was metallic and final. Based on the evidence presented, specifically the admission of non-familial status and the intent to defraud, J.C. Penny Credit Services is classifying this formally as identity theft. We will not be treating this as a familial dispute. We will be turning the file over to the local authorities for prosecution unless a restitution agreement is signed immediately. My father slumped in his chair. The fight went out of him. He looked old, He looked defeated. "What do you want?" he whispered. "I want you gone," I said. Marisol pushed the settlement agreement across the table. It was thick. It was comprehensive. Full repayment of all legal fees incurred by my clients. Marisol listed. Immediate repayment of the unauthorized credit inquiry fees and a permanent, irrevocable notice of no contact. She pointed to the signature line. You will not contact Aurora. You will not contact Liam. You will not contact Owen. You will not go to his school. You will not send gifts. You will not ask neighbors to call. If you violate this agreement, the fraud charges will be unpaused, and we will press for the maximum sentence. And given the amount of debt you are carrying, I guarantee you do not want the IRS looking into your other financials, which we will trigger if you push us. My mother sobbed into her hands. But he is our grandson, she moaned. No, Diane, I said. He isn't. You made that very clear. You don't get to claim him when it is convenient and discard him when it is expensive. I uncapped a pen and set it down in front of them. Sign it, I said, or I call the police and give them the recording. My father picked up the pen. His hand was shaking. He signed. He passed it to my mother. She signed. Her tears wetting the paper, Kendra stood in the corner, silent, glaring at me with a hatred that would last a lifetime. I didn't care. I took the signed papers. Marisol checked them. She nodded. We are done here, Marisol said. I stood up. I buttoned my blazer. I looked at the people who had raised me, the people I had spent 34 years trying to please. They looked like strangers. They looked like people I used to know a long time ago. I felt a strange sensation in my chest. I expected to feel heavy. I expected to feel sad. Instead, I felt weightless. It wasn't the loud victory of a movie climax. There were no fireworks. It was just the quiet, profound relief of putting down a heavy suitcase I had been carrying for miles. Goodbye, I said. I turned and walked out. Liam was right beside me. We walked down the hallway, through the lobby, and out into the crisp, cold air of the parking lot. The sun was shining. It was a bright winter sun, sharp and clean. Liam took my hand. He squeezed it. It is over, he said. It is over, I repeated, and I knew it was true. We drove home. The house was quiet when we walked in. My friend, who had been watching Owen, smiled and waved as she left. Owen was in the living room, building a tower out of blocks. He looked up when we entered. His face lit up. Mom! Dad! He chirped. Look! I made a castle. I walked over and sat on the floor next to him. I pulled him into my lap. He smelled like shampoo and crayons. He felt solid. He felt real. He leaned back against me, resting his head on my shoulder. He played with a button on my blazer. Mom? He asked quietly. Yes, baby? He hesitated. Maddie said I don't belong to Grandma. She said I don't belong to the family. My heart squeezed, but it didn't break, because I knew the answer now. I didn't have to lie. I didn't have to make excuses. Maddie was confused, I said, smoothing his hair. But we aren't. He looked up at me with those big, observant eyes. Do I belong to you? He asked. I looked at Liam, who was sitting right there with us, shielding us both. Yes, I said fiercely. You belong to me, and you belong to Daddy. You belong with us. We are your family, and that is the only family that matters. Owen thought about this for a second. He looked at his castle. He looked at Liam. He looked at me. Then, a slow smile spread across his face. It was a smile of pure, unburdened relief. Good, he said. I like our family best. He went back to his blocks. I watched him build, one piece at a time, secure in the knowledge that no one was ever going to knock it down again, for the first time in my life. Christmas didn't feel like a test I was failing. It felt like a gift I finally knew how to keep. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from today. So please leave a comment down below and let's chat. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more, please make sure to subscribe to Lily Revenge Stories. Hit that like button and smash the hype button to help this video reach more people. Your support means the world to us.